All right, well, I'll just speak loudly. My name's Becky Steinbrenner. I could not attend the Friday, February 9th meeting, but I did request the notes. And thank you very much for providing those, Ms. Murphy. I would like to ask if it's possible to get the notes taken from Commissioner Swift's report of the subcommittee regarding the Redmond House, item 8A, that was presented at the February 9th meeting. There were no notes included in that regarding that issue in the information I received from Ms. Murphy, and I would like to have those notes.
Well, first of all, it was about the barn, not the house. So just to clarify
Yes.
which structure was being discussed.
Thank you.
And Annie, I would have to ask you that since we don't have those.
So the notes that I provided are the action minutes, and that is how the Board of Supervisors has directed that minutes for meetings be recorded. So I don't have any additional notes regarding that item.
But, didn't I send something about?
Can you speak into the microphone?
I know we're not supposed to be really talking, but I believe your report was about John Hibble from the Aptos Museum. No, John Kaganwine.
Yeah.
From Ag History.
Are those the notes you mean?
Yes, any notes, it says here that you reported on the subcommittee efforts to locate parties with knowledge of historic preservation who may be interested in salvage of the barn materials for use in historic displays, and the subcommittee to visit the site. So I wanted to read about that. I was not able to attend, I had to work.
So you didn't see the note that I sent the commission about John Kaganwine contacting the Ag History?
I saw an email that John Kaganwine was not interested in.
Oh, no, he was interested. The Ag History Museum was not. And so I sent a little note saying I contacted them and then gave their response. And that, I think, was in our packet.
Okay.
Yes, that was in the packet. I can verify that all the information that you provided to me was in the packet, and I can let you know, Ms. Steinbrenner, that it was all there. I believe it is, but I can certainly double check that for you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Regarding this subject, I like to bring up, in the process, was there any consideration on doing a structure blueprint of the barn before it does get in the process of demolished? Was there actually consideration of having it drawn out for historic cultural resource purposes?
So Carolyn, was that something that was discussed?
Discussed where?
All right, that's what he's asking. Was it ever considered or discussed? And I don't think so, because the point was in trying to salvage the wood that had historical significance and trying to find a home for it. And the bottom line was, as of the meeting, no one was interested in wanting to have salvaged wood. They didn't know where to store it, what to do with it. So I don't think there was any effort then in trying to do a diagram of the structure showing, size, shape, etc.
Well, do you need that? I mean, basically it's for historic review. I mean, despite, somebody wanting the wood, the fact is that in the future, people may want to nowadays with the computer and stuff, you're able to actually restrict it on visual. And for future reference, that would be important to use for a purpose. For just having what the barn looked like visually, and having those drawings could be a benefit for students or future historic preservation.
This is just my thought, I don't know about the other commissioners, but for this commission, because we're part of the planning department, I don't think that that is our role. I think that if there would be, that if there would be anyone interested, it would be the Museum of Art and History in their archives, or maybe Ag History in their archives, something like that.
If I could insert
Yeah.
just a small note.
Now, that was just my thought, but.
Yeah, Rob Edwards did a whole archaeological study out there. And so that has been recorded, and I think the county planning department has that. And I think it's been,
Drawn out?
it's been, yeah, I'm pretty sure there were maps and things associated. It was done in 2004. So I think work was done to, sort of diagram what it looked like.
Can that be done and sort of things sort of being hold a little bit till we verify that is there, so it could be used for a reference, so
I have no idea.
I mean, I'm just bringing it on the table, like, it would be nice to know we have that before we start hauling stuff out and destroying the structural design completely, you know what I mean? I mean, it makes sense to us. I mean, that's what we were dealing with this when we were in the process of restoring the UCSC hay barn. So I'm talking from experience, because we know that they did do structural designs, that archaeology, on the archaeology sites, before there was a worker shed, that they had a person come in and do the structural design, measured everything out, for preservation.
Well, let me, I guess, just ask Annie, do you know if there is a time that they're going to start with the demolition, I guess, of the barn?
My comment would be that the barn, as we know, was not listed as a historic resource on the nomination form for the property. So we already indicated we would give approval of the demolition without requiring the owner to do additional reviews of the barn. So that's not something that we would be requiring at this point from the owner. If there is someone in the public who wants to do that voluntarily, they're certainly welcome to. I also want to note this is not on the agenda, so generally we should keep our comments brief regarding this item.
Yes. So if someone in the public wanted to contact the owners and do something like that?
Yes, an owner was willing to have them access their property.
What if the owner doesn't respond to the public? So far, that's been the case. The other thing I wanted to mention, that even though the university had the structural design on the workers' cabin building, they didn't restructure it, but it's documented now. So if in the future they ever wanted to, they could. And that's the significance of this discussion right now, even though Ann may not want to be talking about it, but the reality is that's what this organization is about, is preservation, protecting our historic cultural resources in the county. And if the university is understands that, which has been quite an uphill situation, we think this chamber could also consider something like that. I mean, it's something that's going to be brought up in the future. Why not discuss it right now? I mean, that's what we believe. My name's Ed Silvero, Villabrands 40 Preservation Society. Thank you.
Can you please call IT and get the microphone working here for the audience? Thank you.
I'm Corral Dieter. I'm not here for this particular agenda item, and I hate to be off topic, but I'm just going to add something to this discussion real quick. I'm part of the organization that owned the Redmond property for a period of time, and we worked very hard to preserve the whole property. And if you would like to contact me, I think our organization maintained some files and some photos that documented the history of the barn as well as the house.
Beautiful.
So, please feel free to see me at the
And
meeting.
what's the name of your organization?
Went through several changes, but it was the Redmond Hirahara Foundation. So we tied the Hirahara and the Redmond history together.
So are you reestablishing?
No, we hit the wall.
Please, we don't have the time to be having conversations between the audience. This was a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting on February 9th. And we have a motion up here to approve the way the minutes were written. So we've got our motion, we've got our second. All in favor? Aye. All right, and unfortunately, I ended up skipping, so we will go back to number 2, which is agenda approval. So is there a motion on the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
The agenda?
I'll second that.
Okay, so all in favor of approving this agenda? Aye?
Aye.
All right. So now number 4, public communications. So does anyone have a topic not on the agenda? And so a 3-minute limit.
Okay, my name is Christina Locke, and I own the Bayview Hotel, the historical Bayview Hotel. And what I'm asking is, I wanted to know, what is the setback required in the landscape plan that this commission approved for Aptos Village Project B, Building 14, I mean, not B, but Building 14, bordering the Bayview Hotel? That was, I believe your plan was approved back in April 2017. So I'd like to know what the required setbacks were at that time. And then my other, should we answer that or should we just continue on?
Well, I don't think we would remember. Annie, is that something that could be looked up and sent to Christine or given to Christine?
I believe that there's been a public records request for that information previously, but I can certainly give you the files that we have on that action that the Historic Resources Commission took.
Okay, thank you. And my next one is that if I could ask that that it would be required to have this Historical Resource Commission first approve all fencing before it's installed around the Bayview Hotel, because the Bayview Hotel, right now I'm feeling very much encroached upon. I've had to hire a surveyor to come and redo my whole boundaries. And I don't believe the setbacks are correct on the building approval back in 2017. And so there's obviously problems for me. There's a problem with privacy, as well as the replacement of the fencing that they are supposed to do, but no one's ever really approached me on it. I mean, they're going to tear down all my fencing, and there's been no discussion as to what they're going to replace it with, if they're going to replace it. So the Bayview Hotel will be completely open space to a parking lot of the village project. So I'm really concerned about that. And so the other issue right now on the encroachment is the fact that the back entrance of the Bayview is being encroached upon, I believe, by Barry Swenson project. And so I'd like to make a comment about that and see what can be done about it, because I think this committee is supposed to protect the Bayview and its surroundings. So I would really like to have some comment on that. Thank you.
Do you have the microphone, people coming up?
If you'd like to take a brief recess, I can go investigate that.
We can do that. This would probably be a good time before we get into the body of the agenda.
Okay.
All right.
Because
So we're going to take what, 5 minutes? 5 minutes?
I am
Break?
I am getting it all on the camera so far. I'm
It's
getting the
being
volume.
recorded,
The
okay?
volume
I'm
reading
just
is good.
concerned because you make some very important decisions here. And because of the action minutes, there's no record of what's discussed here at all. And so I am working with Mr. Tanner to make sure that your discussions are recorded for other people who are interested and cannot attend. So,
Excuse me, we're taking a break right now, so if you want
Okay.
to save your comments for the public.
all right, I'll say that. Thank you.
We got 5 minutes.
So we're going to continue the meeting, and it's now, from my angle, looks like about...
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Hey!
That's great.
All right then, so ignore what I just said. And Christine, so you were talking about the fencing?
The fencing, yes. So what I was asking the board, the Historic Resource Commission Board, is that it be required to have this commission look and approve all fencing before it's installed. That's my request.
Well, in this part, the public communications, we don't normally get into a dialogue, we just listen.
I mean, it is an historical monument of Aptos. I think
Yes.
fencing around that building should be approved by the commission.
May I comment?
Yes, please, Annie.
So your commission already took action on the historic preservation plan for the Apple Barn and the Bayview Hotel. So all conditions are being complied with. You might suggest that if you have issues with making sure the plan to comply with that would be a matter for the building department, not for the commission. But the commission has already taken action, so we will not be opening a new approval process for them to review fencing.
Well, the fencing is not clear on what they're doing, so I don't know how anything can be approved if they're not saying what they're going to be putting up. You know, it says on the plans that they're going to remove the fencing, what's currently there, but they're not making any suggestions as to what they're going to replace it with. So I'm concerned about that. I think that I don't know why this board wouldn't take action in making sure that they are going to replace it with the right property of, first of all, being sure that the privacy of the Bayview is taken care of, you know, and also the kind of material that they're going to be using, or are they going to just leave it all open, like anybody can just walk in, you know? That's what it looks to me, because that's...
Well, have you been to the building department and pulled out what was the plan and talked to them about it?
Well, it's very vague. There's nothing that states anything about fencing, what they're going to replace it with, and where they're going to be putting fencing. I've also tried to reach Mary Gourlay. She's the one that, part of the Aptos Village project manager for Barry Swenson, and she's never returned my call. I've called her several times. I sent her a letter just recently, regarding fencing and regarding to cease encroaching on my property, and she's just ignoring me. So I find that absurd, you know. So I don't know what else to do, honestly. When you have a builder that is supposed to preserve and work with the neighbor, and they're ignoring you, I don't know what else to do. I mean, this commission is supposed to protect the Bayview, and that's the only last resource I thought to go to. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I was requesting the setback plans too back in April, what was approved, because I don't have any, the notes apparently are not there, and nothing is there to protect me. So I'm a little concerned, I mean, I'm really not a little concerned, I'm really outraged is what I'm at.
Well, we certainly all hear your I'm not sure what we can do because we're really not a compliance department on this. And since it was discussed and looked at and approved a year ago, I certainly, the commission doesn't remember all the details. And so you mentioned the building department.
Yes, I would suggest you talk with the building department and ask to review the plans and make sure they're being complied with. But I do review the Action Historic Resources Commission to ensure they're complying with those plans, but I would check with the building department.
Okay, thank you.
Ed Silver with Villabrands Fort Preservation. What she just mentioned was, it's very significant. This building is extremely significant through our history of the county, and this council is supposed to protect our history. Two of these members have been affiliated with museums, and one has created a museum. We just find it interesting that this thing is sort of passing the buck. Perhaps, what do you need? A stack of documentation regarding the significance of the Bayview Hotel and the first post office in Aptos, which was right next door? And you're totally aware of the significance of the foundation of establishing Aptos right in the center where we're talking about right now. I mean, I find it very frustrating with this thing where it goes back to the planning, it goes back to this and that. Your goal is to protect our county historic resources before they all get demolished. I really get a sense that some of the people on this chambers ought to be working for a developer. Yeah. Because basically what's going on is you're more assisting them to knock out our historic resources than protecting them. And this is serious. So it is your responsibility to protect this significant area. And it's one of these things where I'm hearing, well, we've already gone through that. Go back to them and see what's happening. No, that's why you're on this commission, is to protect our cultural historic resources in the county. Perhaps you need to communicate more with the state on what is your position here on this board.
You have one more minute.
May I make a comment?
So we don't have a problem if you say, well, show us the evidence. But we can, but really you can get on the website and see that we know what we're talking about. If you prefer a stack of documentation this high, we can provide it. But it's going to take a lot of this commission's time to do that. Do you need to have that from us to prove the significance of what we're talking about on every issue, to protect every building and every site and I'm talking about issues where the Smithsonian's going to start getting this information. We're already providing the Smithsonian our significant history where this county and the city doesn't have an interest in it. Meaning the United States of America is interested in our history, and we're getting this knock down the buildings for progress attitude.
May I make a comment? I think there may be a misunderstanding among the public regarding how the permit process works. So applicants go through a strenuous approval process. The Historic Resources Commission, that are all volunteer work and have been dedicated to historic preservation throughout their lives, take their role very seriously in reviewing a project, making sure it complies with standards, doing the best we can to protect the historic resource. Once a permit has been issued, the applicant is granted vested rights to develop in accordance with the permit. So the commission does not have the authority to go back and say, now you need to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that anyone who applies for a permit would feel the same way. If they received a permit to build a house, and then they went through all the process, and then a member of the public said, I don't like the way those windows look, we wouldn't be able to say, you need to now go back and redo this. So that's how the process works, and I think there may be a misunderstanding and also a little bit of maybe non-familiarity with how seriously the commissioners take their role for historic preservation in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky Steinbrenner from Aptos. I would just like to make a comment that according to the Brown Act, your commission has the ability to do 3 things when a member from the public gets up and asks you for help. You can ask the commission to approve it to be put on a future agenda for public discussion. You can refer them to staff, or you can, what's the other one? There are 3 things. You can have a discussion with them about it to clarify information. So it's not like you're powerless. You do have things you can do, especially when you've got a property that's on the National Historic Registry. I think that bears a lot of significance. And I also want to comment that this Aptos Village project is significant because it is part of the historic Aptos Village, and it does have an historic preservation plan intact that is also reviewed by the state. And under CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act process, those issues need to be strictly adhered to. And in fact, when there is a historic preservation plan, that trumps other things to do with the building permit. That plan must be upheld. And if things change regarding the plan, things have to be addressed. This fence that Ms. Locke is talking about is an historic fence. The developer has sent her a letter saying they're going to tear it all down. That was not part of the discussion when this historic preservation plan was discussed initially or approved. This is new information, and under CEQA, you have the right and the responsibility to address it now before they put up some unhistoric fence that completely changes the context, historic context of the nationally registered historic Bayview Hotel. I also want to say that the survey that was done by the developer is incorrect, and Ms. Locke has had to hire her own surveyor. There were 3 initial monuments that the Swenson's surveyor said they could not find that were found by Ms. Locke and have changed the property boundaries from the initial historic preservation plan and from the Phase 1 final map that was approved by the Board of Supervisors. Your board needs to address this. I want to move on to the Redmond House and just publicly state that the barn is a critical piece of history in our area regarding the Japanese-American reestablishment after World War II. That barn is where the families lived who were not as lucky as the Hirahara family was, wherein their neighbors and the community paid their property taxes for them while they were imprisoned. Many families did not have good neighbors like that, and I think the Pajaro Valley ought to be really proud of that and want to preserve that. So let's not knock it down. Let's do as Mr. Silvera said, at least document it well. There are other people, not just the Hague history, that want to do this. There's Mr. Kopernik that I've talked with your group about that wants to preserve this.
Thank you.
Has the
Thank you so
means.
much, Becky.
And the Aptos Creek Bridge is cracking and will fall down.
I'm sorry.
That's for sure. I'll second that.
So, is there any other?
Well, I neglected to give you this survey of the boundaries of the Aptos Village, of the Bayview Hotel, showing the fencing and the encroachment that's occurring. So I'd like you to have that.
If you can give it to Annie.
With the correct, what was that word called again? The boundaries? Yeah, with the correct boundaries stating on that.
Thank you. She can make copies and get them to us.
Ed Silvera with Villabrands 40. This is another issue.
Excuse me,
I'm
but-
sorry, no, we're only allowing per agenda topic one discussion.
I know, but I was adding my process on to
You
somebody
grabbed
else
at the
coming.
microphone and you had your 3 minutes. We have a long agenda to go through.
Well, I haven't discussed my issue yet. I've been helping.
I'm
working-
sorry then, because I stated at the beginning of the meeting that each speaker would have one 3-minute time per agenda item.
Well, this is an agenda item. This is a
No,
separate
we're-
agenda item.
We're still under public communications. And
Excuse me, Linda, what you're saying is that I'm not able to make a public process regarding a previous issue that I've had with this commission?
you were up, you had your one time per public communications agenda item number 4.
So what you're saying is that I need to come back the next commission to bring up an issue that I've communicated with this commission for over a year now. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I protest, Linda. I protest your process.
And Annie will duly notate that.
Okay, where are we on the agenda? Okay.
Okay, now we're going down to number 6, to public hearing items. And this is, we are considering amending the Santa Cruz County inventory of historic resources to designate the Silva Ranch Barn in Aptos as a locally significant historical resource. It's a barn. And Annie's going to do the background and tell us about it.
Thank you, Commission. So this is an application to designate the Silver Ranch Barn in Aptos as a historic resource in R5, meaning locally significant. The applicant is Fallon Stefan. The owners are Carell and Phil Reeder. They are in the audience today. The location is on Hames Road in Aptos or Corlitas, approximately 1.5 mile north of the intersection with Freedom Boulevard. The staff recommendation is that your commission recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the application to designate the barn. So the Santa Cruz County Code, Section 16-42050, provides a process to apply to designate a resource as historic. The property owner may apply for the designation. The application requires a submittal of a historic documentation report with a Department of Parks and Recreation form. And the approval of the designation is subject to meeting the designation criteria and required findings in the county code. And the action requires a public hearing and recommendation by your commission, followed by a public hearing and final action by the Board of Supervisors. So the required application materials have been submitted. The DPR form was prepared by Fallon Stefan, and she meets the criteria established by the Secretary of the Interior Standards for preparing historic documentation. So to designate a resource, for any resource to be designated, the county code requires that the resources shall have retained their architectural integrity and historic value. In addition to that, the resource is required to meet one or more criteria for designation. For this documentation report, the information provided provides evidence that the resource is associated with a historic event or thematic activity of local, state, or national importance. So first we'll review the qualification under criteria 2, the association of the Silver Ranch Barns with a thematic activity of local importance. This barn has been associated with local agriculture and the local apple industry since it was constructed in 1903 or 1904. The barn has been in continuous use on a working apple ranch from its construction date to the present day. The period of significance in the DPR form indicates that it's The county historic context statement also confirms the significance of agriculture and specifically the apple industry as an important theme in local history. And the DPR form also notes the significance of the barn in the agricultural history of Pleasant Valley as well. The photos show generations of family members who owned the barn and the ranch and worked on the ranch during the 20th century. The photo on the right of the apple pruning is taken at the ranch. So in addition to being associated with local apple industry, the barn has also retained its architectural integrity and historic value. The barn is described as a western broken gable barn with the taller center bay flanked by two side bays with sloping roofs. The photos were taken by Fallon Stefan in 2017. This photo shows the shot of the interior. You can see the roof rafters with the shake roof up above. The barn has been covered with the corrugated roofing material, but the shake roof is still preserved under the roofing material. This is a illustration of some of the hardware on the barn. This is a alley track door and hanger that's still being used. The DPR form also establishes that the barn meets the aspects of integrity as identified in the Secretary of the Interior standards. This shows the south and east facades. This is a detached addition. This shows some of the fenestration openings on the barn. This is a door for shoveling manure out of the barn. So the barn is still in its original setting and location. The original materials are still present, including redwood siding, doors. Some of the doors were replaced, but with compatible materials in the same design. Hardware, shake roofing. There have been minor repairs and alterations using compatible materials within the period of significance for the barn. It's still associated with the apple industry. Retains feeling as a historic cider barn. The original form is preserved, and the DPR form also indicates the barn has been well preserved. Under the California Environmental Quality Act, the project is exempt per CEQA guidelines section 15308, action by regulatory agencies for protection of the environment. As a designated historic resource, this barn would be subject to county historic preservation policies and regulations which protect resources for future generations. The CEQA notice of exemption has been prepared and is included in your packet. So to conclude, the application that has been submitted with the required historic documentation report meets the designation criteria in the Santa Cruz County Code and the required findings as provided in Exhibit D of the staff report for inclusion in the county's historic resources inventory as a structure of local historic significance. Therefore, it is recommended that your commission recommend, based upon the required findings, that the Board of Supervisors amend the county's historic resources inventory to include the Silver Ranch Barn with the attached DPR form as an NR5 resource, and recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt the attached notice of exemption, and lastly, direct staff to prepare a resolution with appropriate recommendations to forward to the Board of Supervisors for final action. Thank you.
All right, so opening up for any comments, discussion by the board?
Yeah, can I say something?
Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful.
Commissioner
Well, first, I'm really excited that this is happening. It's so nice to be able to have something added to the inventory and to see one of my favorite buildings is now listed. I also wanted to mention that I know the building across the way is it the Pleasant Valley School? It is the Pleasant Valley School. And the Silva family, but you purchased it. It was your I forgot which relative it was, but the Silva family purchased the old school where Mr. Silva had gone to school and to save it. And so there's a little, it's a little enclave kind of when you go down the road, and it's really nice to see, and so I'm very excited. I'm excited in your behalf. My questions were pretty simple. It just occurred to me, why, Annie can answer, why is it an HR5 and not an HR4? Is it my memory that, could it be an HR, a 4 instead of a 5?
Well, the DPR forum recommended the NR5 rating for the structure of local historic significance, so that's what we're recommending.
Okay, but it could be a 4. I mean, the association with the family pioneers in the Power Valley could give it a higher ranking, right?
If the commission were to recommend that, I would probably recommend that we would need additional documentation to support that.
That wouldn't
listing
put
as an
anybody through
NR4.
that. I was just curious. And the other thing that I saw that copies of all of this documentation automatically go to the Museum of Art and History and a couple other places, but I didn't see the Agricultural History Museum or Power Valley Museum. And I just think it would be nice if it went there too.
Certainly that could be made as part of the motion for
Part of the motion?
Okay. That's all.
I was just going to say, in our Exhibit D, it lists the different rankings, and under 4, it says a property which may be eligible for listing on the National Register if additional research provides a stronger statement of significance, or if the architectural integrity is restored. These buildings have either high architectural or historical significance, but have a low rating in the other categories. So maybe that might be something worth pursuing in NR4.
Well,
Yeah.
to me, I thought, I just was curious if it would qualify as a 4.
So with additional research as on the historical significance, maybe.
Yeah. But I would, like I said, I wouldn't put anybody through additional, given all the work that's been done.
So you're not done yet. Let me find where my motion is. So, Commissioner Jenkins? So are you supportive, and is this?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think the report lays it out quite well and is well explained, and yes, definitely. I think it's important to, if it's part of the apple, the apple thing and the agricultural thing, it's very important in the Pajaro Valley, extremely significant. So I think it's a very fine idea.
So a quick question. Commissioner Swift, you said to add the Pajaro Valley Historical Association and?
Oh, the Ag History Project.
Okay. And a question for Annie. Is this our first barn on the inventory?
I believe you're forgetting about the apple barn.
Yes, oh, of course. How silly of me.
I think there's several barns, aren't there?
I'd have to check. There may be others.
Okay, because I know we discussed about trying to find barns to preserve and, yeah.
I think there are others.
Is there any other discussion on this? All right, so could I get a motion, and if somebody wants to, I think it was after the motion was made.
Is this a public hearing?
So let me clarify with Annie. My understanding, what we've been doing is making the motion and seconding it, then opening it up for public comments before we do any voting.
You can do it either way. You can open up for comments now or make a motion and then open for comments.
Okay, do we want to have public comments first? All right. The floor is now open for any public comments on this agenda item of adding the Silva.
Hi, I'm Fallon Steffen. I'm the architectural historian who prepared the application for the barn. And I just wanted to say I think it's a really unique property. It's really well preserved. The owners are very enthusiastic about this process and they've been there every step of the way. It's a lovely preserved barn in its original context, and I think for this area it's really important. These things are disappearing quickly, so it was important to them to make sure that that didn't happen here. So, yeah.
Thank you, it's good to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments?
Once again, I'm Carell Reeder, and my husband and I are the owners of the barn. And part of our reason for this, I think, is often properties that make it onto a national register or even a county local inventory are extraordinarily unique properties. They have an architect that did something very notorious and outstanding. But if we only preserve those things that are really odd or unique, we aren't really telling the full story of a community's history. We're capturing kind of an extreme case. And I just think it's really wonderful that a barn, which is the hub of a family's economic source, is important to save, because it tells their story. That's where they kept their animals secure from the horse thieves, and where they sharpened their tools, and where they stored their inventories of hay. And it's the everyday history that we sometimes miss out on because we're so taken with something that's more notorious. So it's really a pleasure to be here today and to see that you value something like this. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky Steinbrenner. I'm delighted. Thank you for all the work and that you put in, and the initiative to make this happen. I want to ask what a further degree of research would be required to make it an NR4. I wouldn't want to put any more burden or expense on the property owners, but I just want to concur with what Ms. Reeder said, that it is the everyday aspects of our county's history that also need to be preserved. So I would like some information about how much more effort would it take to make this barn an NR4. And I would support that if at all possible, and ask that perhaps the county somehow assist, if it would be an expense to the owners, through grants or something to help preserve this. I also want to ask that, I know that your commission has looked at the Mills Act, so I would like your commission to pursue that avenue as well, to help give financial incentive for people like the readers who care about preserving what they have and taking care of it, rather than knocking it down to build hotels or whatever they want to do. And to the end of everyday farming is the padded dairy barn on Valencia on the list. That's a very significant everyday piece of history that I would like to see. Is that on our list already?
I'm certainly not familiar.
The padded dairy barn, it's on Valencia, there, on Valencia School Road.
On Valencia School Road? Oh.
Yeah, Valencia School Road.
Oh, on Valencia School Road, I'm not familiar with the barn.
It's a beautiful barn, It says Patent Dairy. I have a photo of it that I included in an exhibit I made at the Aptos Library about a year ago on the history of agriculture in Aptos, and it's in good condition. And
On the Trout Gulch end or the Valencia?
on the Trout Gulch end. Yeah. It's beautiful, and it's still owned by the Padden family. Noel Padden passed away maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There is an audio recording of him talking about the history of that farm and the significance of it in Aptos.
On Valencia School Road.
Yes,
Not
Just-
Valencia.
Valencia School Road, where it gets that really windy place and it comes down and it sort of levels out and attaches, connects with Trout Gulch. It's a fabulous barn, and I'd like to see it
Well, maybe
preserved.
we can get that information from you, and possibly it could be added to our watch list.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'd like to help with that in any way, and again, I really am grateful to this family for preserving this barn. And
Thank
I'd
you.
like to see it in NR4 too.
Ed Silvera with Little Ranch Freddie Preservation Society. As a Preservation Society, we also definitely support putting this, recognizing this barn and the direction it's been presented here earlier today on earlier comments. I also want to make a comment too regarding Carolyn's awareness that things also are around things that were recognized that are nearby. That's exactly what we like to see from the commission, being aware of other buildings and also pull into to show a bigger picture. So it's more appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, would someone like to make a motion? The items are on this document, and it's the 4 items all together as one motion. Yeah.
For items, I would make a motion to recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt the Silva Barn as a historic resource with the modification that we also send a notification to the Agricultural History Project and the Pajaro Valley Historical Association.
And
Okay. Recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt the attached notice of exemption and direct staff to prepare a resolution with the appropriate recommendations to forward to the Board of Supervisors for final action.
thank you. And would someone like to second that?
I'll second that.
All right, Carolyn, Commissioner Swift is second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion is approved. Yay. So, paperwork. Now we're going on down to new business. So, and at the last meeting, there was some discussion on how to have more effective, courteous public meetings. And Annie from the planning department sent out to us a parliamentary procedure and a lot of comments on that. I don't know if there's any discussion from the other commissioners. I know I was trying to start off and incorporate some of the suggestions made in this document. What is, did you feel that it was helpful?
Definitely.
Very.
Yes, yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much, Annie, and I we'll continue to try and incorporate the suggestions and ideas here.
And yeah, Annie, thank you for finding the information. It's very, very helpful.
All right, then down to number B, considering nominations for the Museum Art and History Awards. This is the annual landmark award ceremony that's held the first Saturday in May. And those are those oval wooden or oval blue plaques you see on buildings. But that's from the Museum of Art and History, the Landmark Award. The commission also does a certificate as part of the ceremony to owners that go to lengths to preserve their homes, their businesses, and so on. So there was a suggestion from Annie that she wanted us to consider now is it the Winton Ayers House or the Watson Ayers House?
It says Winton.
Well, but on the second page it says Watson.
That's right.
And so I, for one, wanted to get that clarified. And it states here the property retains the original features, including material, elements, forms, and setting of an early 20th century live oak farmhouse and meets the County of Santa Cruz criteria for historic resource number 5. So Annie, do you want to give us any background on the house? It looks beautiful.
I thought it might be, oftentimes awards are given for someone who does a exemplary project, but I thought it might be nice just to recognize they did come in for a few window replacements, but retaining it sort of without a lot of modifications and retaining a lot of historic character, and it's well preserved. So I just thought it was notable in that regard, and it's a very attractive residence as well. So that was my thoughts why it might be worthy of a certificate.
For the public, it is on Roland Drive, and looking at the map, it looks like it's, what is that, 40th Avenue? 30th Avenue? 30th Avenue, and it kind of does a curve and becomes Roland. And yeah, there's 34th Avenue. Well, that gives us only 1 month. Both of you are on the committee.
Right.
How is the ceremony and?
I wish to correct you, it's May 12th. It's not the first Saturday after all. They changed it this year because it goes in tandem with Researchers Anonymous.
Overreachers?
Researchers. You know what I mean. Anyway, it's May 12th from 11 to 1 at the Museum of Art and History this year.
Okay. So that would give just a month to get any additional information together and then put it together to be able to present in a PowerPoint slideshow. And we need somebody who could make the presentation and get the certificate together.
If I can comment, I'm happy to help with the certificate as well. I usually can help put that together.
I don't know about a PowerPoint. We usually just have a picture of the house. I don't think.
Right, but it's a PowerPoint slide.
Right, we just send that right off to the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I could probably do that. There's good information here. I mean, by the time you get to the awards part of this, I mean, the commendation parts of the ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
time is getting short, so they usually show a nice picture of the house and give an explanation, but not much more than here.
And this doesn't have a lot to say about it, as far as what they've been doing.
Well, I would
so,
concur with our,
yeah, no, if you'd be willing to do the ceremony, because I believe I'm going to be gone that weekend. I'm not going to be in town. So, okay, so then, shall we make a motion? I'll make the motion this time. So the motion is to select I'll say Winton Ayers House for a Historic Resource Commission Certificate of Commendation for Preservation to present at the Museum of Art and History Landmarks award ceremony being held on Saturday, May 12th. And Commissioner Jenkins will be the presenter of our nomination.
okay?
So would someone like to second?
I second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so. All right. The next item on the agenda is to elect the chair and vice chair for the next term, which actually began yesterday and goes till March 31st next year. So there's 5 of us.
Oh, you're opening it up.
I'm waiting for somebody to jump in and say, me.
I make a motion to nominate Commissioner Phillips as chair.
I second it.
I don't want to take all the fun. All right,
Susie, are you willing to be vice chair?
Sure.
I think, aren't you vice chair this last time?
She's been vice chair for a couple of years, I think.
Okay, so we have a motion for, well, Carolyn, you should probably make a motion. I should make it my own motion. For the chair and vice chair for this next term.
Okay, I move that Linda Phillips continue as chair of the commission, and Susie Miriam will continue as the vice chair.
Is there a second?
I seconded it. Oh, did I? Yes, I seconded it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so for the term of April 1st, 2018 to March 31st, 2019, Commissioner Phillips will be the commission chair, and Commissioner Miriam will be the vice chair. So now moving into agenda item number 8, old business. This is continuing, I believe, our discussion on the city Santa Cruz County Code Regulations and Procedures regarding applications for demolition and partial demolition of historic resources. And so that is, we have a attachment 8A. Did everyone read the attachment?
I do have a presentation as well.
So, yes, I was just going to say, if we're all familiar with what we were sent. Annie, would you please continue with your presentation?
Thank you. So this is a review of the requirements in the Santa Cruz County Code for applications for demolition or partial demolition of historic resources. Also, review of the scope of your commission's authority and how best to describe projects involving demolition of historic resources to the public. Staff is recommending several revisions to procedures and clarification to regulation in order to provide clear information to the public, clarify definitions, and provide additional review by qualified professionals of applications for complete demolition. And this will be a brief presentation focusing on the recommended revisions. Your staff report has more detailed review of the regulations. The first proposed revision is to revise the definition of complete demolition to indicate that demolition with reconstruction of the resource is also considered complete demolition. And the result of this change would be that since applications for complete demolition require a public hearing before your commission, followed by a public hearing and final action by the Board of Supervisors, this change will mean that future applications for demolition with reconstruction will also be considered for final action by the Board of Supervisors. And this will give the public additional opportunity for input on the application. And this proposed code revision would be brought to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration with other code cleanup items. The second proposed revision is regarding the required notice of public hearing. All applications for demolition and partial demolition require a public hearing, and there's a required public notice of the hearing. And staff is proposing for future applications for complete and partial demolition, the notice of public hearing will include the extent of proposed demolition in total linear feet and the percentage of the exterior walls of the structure proposed for demolition. And this will help make it very clear to the public the extent of proposed demolition. The third proposed change is regarding peer review. So as part of the historic documentation report that is required for applications for demolition or partial demolition, there is a historic documentation report required, which documents that preservation is not feasible due to the deteriorated condition of the structure or object, or would create exceptional hardship, or is necessary to alleviate a dangerous condition. So as part of any application for complete or partial demolition, staff requires a report from an engineer evaluating and analyzing the condition of the structure for compliance with one or more of the criteria, demolition criteria. So staff is recommending that for applications for complete demolition, that in addition to the staff review and evaluation of the structure by the building official, which is also required by the code, that the county's historic resource consultant do a peer review of the engineer's report. And this will provide additional assurance that the application for demolition meets the required criteria in the code. Additionally, the Santa Cruz County Code authorizes your commission to specify additional requirements or information to include in the historic documentation report. So I wanted to make you aware of that as well. So to conclude, staff believes that these proposed revisions will help improve public transparency and additional professional review of the application for complete demolition. So it is recommended that your commission recommend that staff initiate the following revisions. One, clarify the definition for complete demolition in the county code as recommended in this report for consideration by the Board of Supervisors. Update the application requirements for complete demolition to note that peer review of the engineer's report by the county's historic resource consultant will be required. For future applications for complete and partial demolition, staff would include in the notice of public hearing the extent of proposed demolition in total linear feet and in the percentage of exterior walls of the structure. In addition, it is recommended your commission identify any additional requirements or information to include in the required historic documentation report for demolition applications. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Annie, I didn't get this report in my packet. Is there a copy out here?
So sorry.
Start being transparent here.
Did the other commissioners receive the report?
Yeah.
Is there any comments, any discussion on the changes?
I guess I just have, starting question is how these, essentially making these changes kind of came up in the department. Like what was the reason? Is this something that we've requested in the past or?
We discussed this at some meetings last year, and we asked for we wanted to be more clear and have better definitions, I think.
It was when there's a little house in Aptos that was demolished, and it was listed as a partial demolition.
Oh, okay.
And there was a feeling that there wasn't adequate notice to the community as to what a partial demolition is.
Okay. Thank you. Now, this is, of course, only going to apply to those structures that are listed on the county inventory?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you know what the procedures are when someone of any structure, with any structure, comes in for a demolition permit? Is there any consideration or review of the age or potential significance at that time, if there's anything that's not listed but might be 50 years old or older?
So under the county code, if someone applies for a demolition permit and there is no other discretionary permit associated with that, we don't have a mechanism to require review of that. But if there is a discretionary application that includes a proposal for demolition, then as part of the secret review, for anything 50 years old or older, we do a review of that, and we often will require a historic report on the property if it appears that it may qualify.
Properties on our watch list, would they be flagged for historical review if somebody wanted to demolish?
Because we don't have a requirement in our code, unless there's a discretionary application, if there's a discretionary application, then definitely we would undertake that review. But if there's no discretionary application required, then we don't have a way to require that as part of the building permit.
Could you define that discretionary?
Under our county regulations, if someone applies to demolish a structure, normally that would just require a building permit, meaning if they meet the requirements, there's no conditions or other type of review. It's sort of a checklist sort of thing. But there are circumstances where there is a discretionary approval required. That can include properties in the coastal zone, often will require, or if they're proposing, if it's a commercial property, that would usually require discretionary review. If they're proposing a new use of the site, that requires discretionary review. So there are circumstances when it would require discretionary.
So there's really no protection. I'm just thinking if we have a watch list of buildings that have potential historic significance, but they're not on the inventory. Would these sort of slip through and not be noticed?
If there's no discretionary permit, we don't have a way to require review of that in our current regulations.
So there's no real way to protect those buildings?
Without discretionary review, yes, that's right, yeah.
In the Exhibit A, it talks about historic documentation report. And this sounds like this would be for possibly something on the watch list. It says that means a report providing documentation of the historic significance and physical appearance of a historic resource and prepared in accordance with the guidelines established by the Historic Resources Commission. The report may take the form of a narrative with attached photographs and shall include a completed DPR history inventory form. So being you would prepare a form with this, sounds like it'd be something on the list. It's not already in the inventory.
These regulations apply, Chapter 1642 applies only to resources that have gone through the formal process to be designated, so it doesn't apply to properties that are on the watch list but have not gone through the formal designation process.
Okay.
So normally, normally it is a little confusing that that's in our regulations, because if it's designated, there already is a DPR form. But
Yeah.
for a new, there's also historic documentation reports required to add a structure to the inventory, and that's what, we did today. So for that, there was a DPR form prepared for that documentation report. But normally for a documentation report for demolition, there's already an existing DPR form.
Okay, so this is really applying to what's already on the inventory.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a few questions as I'm going through this. Just trying to play this out and see how it would work in the real world. So you've got the special inspections report from the county planning department on the condition of the structure. So who would actually prepare the report on the condition of the structure?
So we require the applicant to provide a report on the condition of the, so it's not listed in the code, but whenever there's a demolition application, it says information which supports the claim that preservation is not feasible, for the reasons listed. So to support that, I require them to submit a report from an engineer documenting the condition of the structure as part of the application. But the applicant is responsible for providing us with the historic documentation report.
Okay, so I'm confused because
Okay.
I want to make sure that this is is clear and.
Right.
So in A, under application requirements, you've got a special inspections report. B is a historical documentation report.
Right.
Which one is prepared by an engineer?
Okay, so the special inspections report, that is when the county building official or their designee, once we have the historic documentation report, then we send the building inspector out to the site, and they will also have viewed the report from the engineer, and then they evaluate the condition of the structure. So A is the county planning department, B is from the applicant.
So B is done first, and then A is done second.
Right.
Maybe switch that. Or, just in anyway, yeah. It's not clear in B that there's an engineer involved.
Right, that's not, I require that as part of the application submittal, but it's not in the code.
But we're modifying the code right now? Well, we're making recommendations to modify the code?
You can, for clarification, yes, and I just, as I mentioned, the HRC has authority to, specify what should be included in the documentation report, so that can be done either as a code modification or in terms of, we have a list of application submittals, so it also could be added to the application submittal requirements.
Okay. I would love to see the application submittal requirements for demolition. Just to know that it's clearly written and outlined somewhere.
One thing I could do is, once we conclude this item and your commission makes a motion what they think should be included, I can provide those at the next meeting for your review.
That would be good, thank you.
The other question is that you talk about peer review of the engineer's report by a county historic resources consultant, but generally a county historic resources consultant would not have an engineering background to be able to actually peer review an engineering report?
Yeah, I'll verify that. The ARG, I believe that they do have engineers on their, they have a large department with various expertise.
So again, maybe clarification that would be a qualified or engineer / whatever, that it's an engineer reviewing this and not just, it's like a lot of numbers.
Right.
Which is probably what I would say.
I have a question too, is this being rewritten to rewrite the entire code on this?
No, I was only proposing one minor clarification to the definition of demolition, but I thought it's more, rather than putting it in the code, that we clarify the submittal requirements that are required with the documentation report, and then that's what would be provided to the applicant, indicating to them what is required to be submitted.
I see.
And I guess, it just keeps, for me, going deeper into the woods is at what point, let's say, all right, an engineer has gone out and looked at a structure and determined that, I don't know, it's maybe 50% structurally sound, but it needs $800,000 of work to bring it up to code or make it, usable. At what point do we say it's too far gone, or you need to keep it?
Right.
There's nothing.
Yeah, it comes down to the criteria in the code. Preservation is not feasible due to the deteriorated condition of the structure or object, or will create exceptional hardship, or is necessary to alleviate a dangerous condition.
So that was my question, is do we have a definition of exceptional hardship?
We do not have a definition.
And that leads kind of into our earlier discussions with either, I guess it was last year, about demolition by neglect. The Redmond House barn. Redmond House barn wasn't on the inventory, and so that didn't come to us. The Redmond House is on the inventory, but there's nothing we can do about it until the owners come in and apply for a demolition permit, at which time we're stuck with this. And anyone who's seen the building knows it's been allowed to deteriorate for 50 years.
It's almost like it's saying this is how you can do a
Yeah.
demolition by neglect. And
Yeah.
I'm really concerned about the exceptional hardship definition, because if that includes, well, it costs too much to say, but then we're,
We don't have any teeth to prevent demolition by neglect, and then we don't have any teeth when the demo comes in. I know that's not what you're asking us to consider today, but I think that, there's some great intent here, definitely to clarify types of demolition, but I think we need to have some more consideration on findings to support demolition or not support demolition. And also to understand, what the process is clearly.
I'm not sure what you mean by understand the process clearly.
Again, what I asked before, when we went to the special inspections report, the historic documentation report, when which happens, whether, the engineer being required for the historic documentation reports, what the special inspections reports is, the process that someone would have to go through when they are submitting an application for demolition. A, this happens, B, this happens, this is what is included in this step, this is what's required of the applicant, this is what's required from the county. Just the standard process.
Yes, okay, I can bring the application submittal requirements. We can bring that at a future meeting.
can I ask another question? I didn't want to interrupt Susie. I'm just also concerned that it says a lesser under, I don't know, I guess on the last page, lesser demolition not meeting the definition of demolition of a landmark or contributing resource may be approved or denied without a public hearing by the planning director. And the planning director at his or her discretion may refer the final action to the Historic Resources Commission. So I'm just wondering, I worry about phrases like lesser demolition.
That is defined in the code. So partial demolition is defined as the demolition of an aggregate of 50 or more linear feet of exterior wall or more than 50% of the footprint of the landmark or contributing resource. So if it's less than that, then that would be considered lesser demolition.
So if they were taking out 40 linear feet, then it wouldn't normally come before us. That would be at the discretion of the planning director.
I would say that it depends on the building. Generally under that also says the demolition is other than minor, inconsequential, or significant, and has been determined by the planning director to affect the significance of the landmark or contributing resource. So if it were a small building and they wanted to demo 40 feet, I would bring that to the commission. I wouldn't consider that insignificant.
But in a situation where, say, they wanted to replace all the windows, would that come before us?
There also are definitions in the code for what is considered a minor project that can be reviewed at staff level. So there have been circumstances where they're replacing the windows and they're proposing to replace them in kind with wood frame windows, and that's something that would fall within the minor category that I would typically review at staff level.
But if they were character-defining feature of the structure, I mean, that's my concern, is that a building that had character-defining features that were somehow fell in the lesser category might disappear. So I'm just hoping that there's something that says that if a lesser demolition involved some significant features, that it would come to us.
Yes, I mean, I can certainly make a note of that, or we could, I mean, yeah.
So along this line, how many or how often do you get permits to do some small change, i.e. change all the windows, maybe change a door? You don't do anything about painting, do you? I think roofs and painting.
Right, painting does not require review. Roofing, re-roofing requires, anything that's a material change requires review. So re-roofing would require review, window replacement require review, decks requires review, fences require review.
What about things like a porch?
Porches require review, yes.
Okay. So if somebody wanted to enclose a porch that hadn't been enclosed?
Yes, that would require review.
And then the planning department decides based on what it was, what they want to do, the materials, how similar, whether it gets approved in the planning department or whether it gets reviewed and passed to us for our review and recommendation.
Right, and there is a definition in the code of what's a minor alteration, so that also comes into play in terms of what type of review should be required.
So I have just, I just looked up, City of Oakland actually has demolition findings for historic properties that you might want to look at. These things include the preparation of an economic viability report, looking at building soundness, considering the building maintenance history, considering the existing building's appraised value, the public benefits for and against demolition, and then there's optional assessment criteria. So there's actually, it looks like they've got 6 findings that not only just look at, you know, the blanket general, is it feasible, but really breaks that down to, you know, what the building is worth, how it's been maintained in the past, the public benefits of the structure, etc. I can email this to you, but that's something that I would like to see the county look at, so that we have some way to actually protect buildings in absence of a demolition by neglect ordinance.
So do we need to do anything on this today, or are you going to come back with it?
Well, I would like a motion from the commission.
So yes, I think several things have been mentioned and I'm a little fuzzy. I would like to see the clarifications, the changes you wanted, that the staff is recommending. Can that be done so that it's obvious to us what it said and what the new change is for what your recommendations are?
Yes, so in the staff report, it does review the proposed revision for the definition, and the other changes were, that I've recommended were procedural changes to the noticing requirements, application submittal requirements, so I can certainly update the application form in accordance with what I've laid out here, and any additional direction from your commission, as well as other motions you wish to make.
So for the next meeting, we would like to see the recommendations so that we can continue discussing them.
Well, aren't those recommendations on the screen right now, but we're revising them slightly, I take it?
Yeah, I'd like to see clarification of the demolition permit submittal requirements and process. And then just some clarification on the language regarding the engineer's report to be reviewed by an engineer. And then I would like to see a set of clear findings.
Hang on. I'm writing this down so we can get this all together. Clarify definition of inspection engineer's report.
Well, that the engineer's report be peer reviewed by an engineer. And that we have a clear set of findings to make when determining whether or not to recommend approval of a demolition permit.
So a clear set of findings to make approval.
Or recommendation for approval, because I believe it is the Board of Supervisors who would take the final action.
Yes, so, I mean, it's fairly straightforward to update the application requirements. In terms of changing the findings, that would be more involved, and, but I can certainly look into that and report back at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So I have three things here that we would put together in a motion that we're asking. Clarification of permit submittal process. Clarified definition of engineer's report by an engineer. Should I put in instead of?
Well, an engineer with the county's historic resources consultant or as part of their team.
Okay, and clear set of findings to make recommendation of approval by Board of Supervisors. So were there some other requests that we want to include in this?
Are you going to the public as well?
Not yet. Did you
I'd like
want
to-
to add anything about lesser demolition?
I think I'm just, was asking about clarification and definitions for,
And you're satisfied?
yeah, I mean, if I'm assuming that you'll pay attention to, that we want more of the definition of things like hardship and lesser demolition. Yeah, I'm satisfied.
And is there anything, you had some other pieces on hardship. Susie, did you want anything
Well, I think if we had some established clear findings, aside from just the information which supports the claim that preservation is not feasible due to the deteriorated condition of the structure or object, or would create exceptional hardship, or is necessary to alleviate a dangerous condition. If we had additional information and specific findings related to those that would help us make that decision, it would be incredibly helpful, I think, to all sides.
So research and report to commission specific findings on hardship.
Findings, essentially what findings are is a list of statements based in fact related to the project at hand, that if we can make all those findings, then we can recommend approval. If we cannot make those findings, then we recommend denial. Right now, all we've got is the one finding that it's not feasible and it would cause economic hardship. However, there's nothing in the submittal requirements that include any economics. It's just an engineer's report and the building official going out and looking at it. If we had specific findings and requirements for those findings, such as looking at the appraised value of the structure, looking at the actual cost to rehab the structure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then we would have a stronger basis to either support demolition or deny demolition. On the flip side, the developer, whoever is looking to apply for demolition or considering going that route with a historic structure, would have codified language so that they would understand the process that they would need to go to, rather than just come to the commission and board of supervisors, fight it out, and then us eventually losing because we do not have the information that we need to make
All different pieces of the picture.
right.
If I could just, comment on the findings, what I can do at the next meeting is report back on the feasibility of updating our findings, and then perhaps there could be a subcommittee on the commission to propose additional findings. I don't know that I'll have time to review and provide a new set of findings at the next meeting, but I can certainly report back on feasibility of updating them and provide the clarification of demolition submittal requirements and process. Recommend that the engineer's report be peer-reviewed by an engineer, and other recommendations as provided in the staff report.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we need to make a motion for you to go and do that?
Yes.
Okay, so before we do that, is there any comments from the public?
I am so excited that this board is finally recognizing what needs to be done. Okay, I've had to pay $4,000 for a survey to be done to protect my property boundaries. When the other surveyor that was hired by the developer did erroneously marked the wrong markings, okay? When the markings were there all along, but they were too lazy to go find them. So I've had to spend money to do this, and that shouldn't be allowed. And I'm just so angry right now. The other thing is that the part that they don't have a demolishing permit to demolish the fence that historically has been there to protect the Bayview. Okay, they don't have a demolishing permit, but yet they send me a letter saying, we're going to demolish your whole fence, and well, whatever, we'll leave it open, whatever needs to be done. We need to be protected as historical buildings, that shouldn't be like overruled by people that just want to develop wherever they want to. I am so excited to hear this new ruling that's about to take place that protects the historical buildings and surroundings of the buildings. I'm like out of my seat with excitement. But the other thing is, for example, there's a new thing coming up, and that is they want to close the ingress and egress of the Bayview Hotel, the only entrance historically that's been there, that's been protected for hundreds of years of this building. So that's a new issue that they're trying to go override to build their own little opening on the other side of Parade Street. confronting the SoCal Drive. Okay, that's a new thing coming up that the board I don't think is aware of and needs to be aware of. That the Bayview entrance will be closed because they're going to put a whole new entrance on the other side. When we're protesting this for a long time with the state, the PUC commission, and so far, sorry, I think I'm done. But anyway,
You have another yellow.
okay. Well, the other thing is they're supposed to supply an arborist to protect the historical tree in front of the Bayview Hotel, the magnolia tree, and that has not been provided by the developer to do an arborist assessment of that tree. So, and then one of my biggest, and should have been my first comment, is that there was a building next to the Bayview. There was a historical building that was demolished, okay? And the person that asked for that demolition, apparently I guess they came into to the county to get a demolition permit. I'm not sure how long they had to do that, to the demolition part, but that person had their office there for over 3 years when it was red tagged and it was nobody was supposed to have that building, okay, because they quickly got a permit to demolish it. So I'm really upset about what's been going on and continues to go on because somebody says, well, yeah, this should have been addressed back then, you know? You don't know, I'm just so upset.
Did you want to finish? Could she use another minute of mine if that's?
No.
Ed Silvero, Phillips 40 Preservation Society. We brought initially to this commission when we first got acquainted, it's quite some time back, regarding the issue regarding the Mills Act and working on issues to create more of a possibility to keep these buildings up regarding, and I believe this is the hardship section. And I think that the Mills Act and anything to do with to accommodate people through any other sources for grants, through the state, through federally, to keep our historic buildings up, because at one time Santa Cruz County was considered one of the most historic towns in the United States. And when the earthquake hit, they just gave the opportunity for people just to knock things down, which they did, and we were taken off the list, which is quite a shame. And even Washington came to this county saying, listen, let's try to hold on to some of these buildings, and they basically shooed them away, which was a big mistake. And so we like this commission to consider the fact that this community, this town, was approached by a federal agency to try to get them to hold their horses on knocking things down. And so we've got a history of that, and I've talked to the person that was even assigned to confront the city of Santa Cruz and certain administrators on this process. But what I'm getting at is that this Mills Act has got to be back on the table. There's been a lot of energy put in. Susie has brought to our attention. She was hired for a number of years to establish it. We still haven't seen the documentation that was supposed to be provided to us on all our work, which I still like to see. Has that been presented to Annie, that documentation on the Mills Act process, Susie? It has. Annie, I'm requesting to get a copy of that information. So again, the Mills Act, anything to do pertaining to the hardship situation needs to be looked into to help people that do want to preserve their buildings, but it costs so much going through processes. There needs to be a lot of consideration in this, and I hope that you consider this recommendation. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky Steinbrunner, resident of Aptos, and I also am very happy to hear these ordinance changes being discussed. I saw what happened with the Aptos Village Firehouse. It was deemed by a county building inspector to be hazardous and red tagged, and an engineer, Redwood Engineering, submitted reports that supported that. And then, as Ms. Locke said, Testorf Construction moved in and had their office there for 3 years. And then the building was torn down when someone from the public pointed out to the planning department that the building had been red tagged. The same engineering firm was the one that submitted the report on the house. I think the address was 8037 or 57 Valencia Street in Aptos. That was the oldest remaining house of the Heen subdivision and was publicly noticed as a partial demolition. The only thing that was saved from that building was a 12-foot long beam, 8 by 8 square virgin redwood beam with square head nails that the crew, the morning the demolition happened, was very kind enough to load into my pickup. I am donating, while on loan, this Wednesday, that beam to the Aptos History Museum. That's all that was saved. Nothing, not even the windows that Ms. Murphy asked be saved. And I was at the hearing when your commission approved that partial demolition thing and all that. And Commissioner Merriam, I really want to thank you for bringing this issue up. Just to say it's not feasible is not enough. There needs to be, and I'm submitting a letter, as I have stated in writing before, that there needs to be some bids submitted to your commission supporting the cost of preservation versus the cost of demolition. Because right now, and what happened with the house on Valencia Street, and that was an NR3 building. And it had come to your commission 2 years earlier saying, yes, we're going to save it. It's a wonderful little house. And then they applied for demolition, partial demolition, somehow, and it was approved, with only saying it's not economically feasible. Your board, your commission needs to meet at these sites and really see what these structures, what these properties are like before you make any decision at all. I'm asking that you also notice those meetings to the public so that a working list that I would like to see your commission develop of local tradesmen. There was one there, Mr. Charles Campbell, the morning of the demolition said he had tried a number of times to talk with the developer about preserving it and they would have nothing to do with him. So I'm submitting my letter with my recommendations and I really want to thank you, especially you, Commissioner Merriam and Swift, for bringing these things up. Thank you very much. Here's my letter.
All right, so we're going to make a motion. So I'll make a motion with what I wrote down. And Annie, we can see if it coordinates with, matches what you have. So I'm making a motion to have a clarification of the permit submittal process, clarify the definition of the engineer's report by an engineer working with the Historic Resources Commission and their team. 3, clarify a clear set of findings to make recommendation of approval by Board of Supervisors.
Sorry, can we go back to the second one?
Sure.
I think engineer's report to be peer reviewed by an engineer, I think is what we're trying to.
An engineer.
Affiliated with the county's historic consultant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So engineer's report by a peer engineer or engineer peer?
Engineer's report to be peer reviewed by an engineer affiliated with the county's historic resources consultant.
Okay.
And then regarding the findings, I am not going to be able to come back with a list of recommended findings, but what I can do is research the feasibility of updating the, revising the findings in the county code and report back to the commission at the next meeting.
Okay, so that would be number 4 as part of our motion. Right.
All right, do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, Commissioner Jenkins seconds that. All in favor?
Aye.
And I would like to recess the meeting for about 5 minutes or so.
Bathroom break?
Yes. So it is now 11, looks like 41. What do you say? We break till 11:50?
No, not that long.
Yeah.
Till 47?
5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, so the board is on recess for 5 minutes. All right, the commission is, I'm calling it back to order at 11:50. And our next agenda item under old business is 8B, update on the attending, going to the California Preservation Conference. So Annie.
Yes, so the county training budget for the Historic Resources Commission can cover the cost of attending one day. So I'm proposing that we attend on Saturday, and we can discuss coordinating carpooling and that sort of thing offline, but I'm excited that we can go. It looks like it should be an interesting conference this year.
Now, you had checked 4 different workshops.
Oh, the commission's welcome to attend whatever workshops they like. It was just, I was just going through and thinking, it was really for interest, but yes, it's certainly free for you to attend whatever you like to think of.
So then basically we're free, since we'll be going down together, but free to pick whatever workshops we want to go to?
Yes.
And then how would we then do the registration? Will we send that into you, or?
The county would take care of the registration once I can have confirmation from everyone who's going, and they're able to take care of that.
But then would you sign us up then for each of the workshops, or do we just walk into them?
You just walk in.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. All right, so we will be going on Saturday the 19th.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't go that day.
Oh. I mean, Friday could also be a possibility, actually. The Friday, it was almost a toss-up. The Friday looked good too, so if your commissioner would prefer to go on Friday, we could also do that instead.
Well, Commissioner Jenkins, do you have a preference of Friday or Saturday?
No, I have a problem looming in the future. I may be away at that time myself, but either is fine if I'm able to come. I'd like to come to either with pleasure.
Commissioner Merriam?
I'm looking at both days now. I was just looking at Saturday.
Because I am free both days.
Well,
Friday does look better.
Friday looks better.
Friday looks better.
Well, Friday has the panel discussion on CEQA and historic resources.
Right, yeah, that would be good, yes.
Yeah.
That would be good.
I could go on Friday.
I could maybe make that work.
Okay, so it looks like maybe we're leaning toward Friday?
Sure.
Okay. All right, and then you can let us know as far as what you find out for the county and registering us and all?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yay. Did we do any training last year? The year before we went to Asilomar. I don't think we did anything last
There
year.
was a webinar last year.
The webinar, but we didn't go to
Right.
to workshops. Yeah, Asilomar I think was the last one. Okay. So moving on to 8C, our list of goals. We started discussing that at the last meeting, February 9th, and voted to continue it onto this goal. And
I'm sorry, can I make one comment? Can you back up just a bit?
oh,
Because you have
certainly.
public comment. it seems to me, since there are a number of good things here looking in this, that it might be a better service to the county's Historic Resources Commission to have you go to different ones rather than all of you going to the same one of these tracks. I mean, there's one on Thursday that looks good, financial incentives for historic residential properties. It seems like it would be a better use of the commission's time and a better service to the historic preservation if you spread out and then report back rather than everybody going to the same one. I'd like to make that recommendation. Thank you.
Ed Silvera, fellow Brand supporter, we support that comment. And it makes perfect common sense to have more information to review and also share with the community and historic organizations. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're looking at our goals.
We're looking at our goals. So on the first one, that was slated to be discussed at this meeting, and we're doing that. We're moving ahead.
Yeah. Checking off one of them.
So, does anyone have any comments on
The first one, we've done what it says, discussed today, and
we've done
made
that?
recommendations. I think we've done that. We're moving toward that goal.
Right, and we'll be, it looks like at the October meeting, continuing on with demolition by neglect.
Right.
So, and I have a feeling that even at the next meeting, we're still going to be tweaking and massaging and working on the whole scope of demolition.
You know, while we're still on that topic, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the work that went into what we got today.
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's really a step forward.
Fantastic.
And I think we sort of focused on everything that, you know, we might want to change. And that needs to be said too.
And it's not a simple, straightforward topic at all.
No.
There's a lot of nuances and as part of that.
But there's obvious progress, so
Yeah.
I feel very good about that.
So, and number 2 and number 3 are, you know, kind of doing the same thing, looking for homes to put on, or buildings to put on the inventory. So doing research and so on, and cleaning up what's there.
I submitted changes to the Aptos area inventory, and then I looked at it again, and it's very rough. But I was just wondering I think the reason that I submitted them was to see if that was the kind of thing that we were looking for.
Are you referring to the watch list or the inventory?
No, I'm talking about the cleanup of the inventory.
Oh, okay.
That was like
Yeah.
6 months ago. I mean, a meeting, meeting
Because I
before
kept
last.
a copy of what you turned in for me as a format to follow.
Yeah.
Because I know some of the buildings have been sold, there's new owners, you know, there's been other things that have happened over the years.
And I looked at it this week and I thought, boy, I was kind of almost flippant about something. Oh, this needs to be changed, you know. And I thought, well, I think what we're looking for is what kind of format we want to make our changes in, and recommendations for change.
Okay, I can look at what you sent me and bring that to the next meeting as well in terms of what type of format we'd be looking at.
That would just so that we can all kind of get on the same page for.
And it just makes it easier for the planning department if everybody's in the same format, you know, to go through and get the relevant information.
And also what kind of comments, you know, because I was saying things like, you know, the Aptos Fire Department DPR obviously needs to be changed since the building's not there anymore.
Yeah.
Things like that, and what phrasing to use.
Okay.
So these are our goals. Does anyone want to make any additions, I guess, or changes, or within each one, any modifications to the description of the goal?
Well, timing on addressing demolition by neglect, October 1st. That's a long time from now.
No, it's 2 meetings.
Okay. I know. I guess that's appropriate. It just seems to me that that's been on our goals list for an awfully long time. And I can wait.
Well, so part of this, the meetings is your time and effort.
Yeah, I guess it makes more sense.
By dividing some of these for each meeting so she can focus and get all the information and get it into a report for us.
Yes, and then I also try and allow time for projects as they come forward. We do have one moving through the process, so we need to allow time for review of projects as well.
Any other comments on the goals?
Thank you.
All right.
I'm glad we've met the first one.
Yeah, right, almost.
So Annie, since we don't have any changes or anything, there's no need for a motion, is there?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have a public comment?
Thank you, Becky Steinbrenner. I would like to see the demolition by neglect discussion moved up to the next meeting because of what's happening at the Redmond Harahara Farmstead, and because across the street from that there are 2 high-class hotels being planned that have limitations regarding what's the word, derelict property around them within eyesight. And because of that, I think there could be some rapid motion that the property owner could take, perhaps without any review by this commission. And if this is discussed in October, that's the beginning of the rainy season. If it were discussed and some recommendations come about in July, that would give the property owner time to take some action to protect the structures before another rainy season. So my request is that your commission take up the issue of demolition by neglect, which has been discussed here today quite a bit in terms of demolition, partial demolition work you're doing, and have that come about at the July meeting to help preserve those properties that are at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. The other thing we could do possibly, commission, is rearrange the order. But Annie, you're the one actually doing the work.
Yeah, she just explained why it wasn't.
Well, what I was thinking was moving the cleanup of the inventory and the watch list down to October, and then moving the demolition by neglect up to July. So basically switching things around. But again, discussing the cleanup of inventory and the watch list, there isn't a lot of, and correct me if I'm wrong, effort on your end, because you know what your workload is, and again, we're just a small little piece out of your entire workload.
Yes, I am trying to be realistic, and I think that probably October would be a better date to have more preparation time for a discussed demo by neglect.
Now, at one time, at a past meeting, I think it was sometime last year, we had asked the, what is it, the business development, I think if they had talked to the owners and if there had been any discussion with the owners, with the Tutt family on the Redmond House with the hotels being built there across the street, and that trying to get, kind of forward thinking if they were having some plans down the road. But I don't remember if anything, because we were going to talk to the family about the Redmond House specifically.
I've had a difficult time reaching them. If you want to request that update on the status of the Redmond House property and future plans be put on the future agenda, I can certainly do that.
And maybe have someone from the Barbara Mason or someone from that department.
Sure.
I don't know if there's another department that would be better.
Right. Yeah, I can certainly check with them and see if they have any information to share with us. I don't know if they do, but if they do, I could ask them to come. I mean, the update may just be that we don't have any new information. That may be all the update is, but if they have something to share, I can certainly talk with them and invite them to the meeting.
Too bad Susie just left. Because she and I did go out there, and
Right.
we met with one of the Tutts, younger. But it was just to look at the barn. It wasn't to discuss any.
I mean, the part of the parcels are actually in the city of Watsonville, and those are moving forward, so you're probably talking about the Redmond House site itself, though, correct?
Exactly, which is in the county part, not the city part.
Right.
Right.
I think the projects are in the city, right? The hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the city of Watsonville.
So I can certainly,
Which is
give them,
across the street.
I can add that to the next agenda to give an update on the Redmond House, and if the commission has, if the Economic Development Department has additional information, I can invite them to attend as
Any
well.
future plans or anything like that.
So where are we?
So at this point, then, it looks like that the meeting dates attached to these different goals and discussing them will stay the same. And does not need a motion. So the last item is 9. If any of the commissioners have any informational items or presentations they would like to discuss. You mentioned the landmark awards.
Yeah, just to invite anybody that would like to come. It's May 12th from 11 to 1 at Museum of Art and History.
And it's open to the public.
It's open to the public.
And it's, the blue plaques are given from the Museum of Art and History. You have certificates from the City of Santa Cruz acknowledging preservation. There'll be a certificate from this commission.
Right.
For a property, and then there's another certificate that's given out, and I forget what that one's for.
I'll check though.
So, but so it's across the spectrum of preservation within our city and county.
Are there blue plaques going out?
Do you remember how many blue plaques?
Watsonville?
Yeah, we're doing one on 79 Monte Vista. It belonged, 79 Monte Vista belonged to Mr. Balich, a Croatian apple rancher. And we're going to go a little bit into apple ranching and stuff.
Oh, it's not the Balich that.
No, it's B-A-L-I-C-H, not
Yeah.
B-A-I-L-I-C-H.
No, Balich well, there was a Balich that built the Palomar Hotel.
No, I don't think so, no.
Andy Balich?
This guy, it was Anton.
I know, Anton, yeah.
But what's interesting is the daughter is still living, so we're going to have a little tiny film done. She'll be in and speaking a bit.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I have nothing to report. Do you have
Anybody out in
anything to
Aptos
report?
getting a plaque? Any houses out?
No.
No?
I'm sure there are some. We have about 7 or 8 plaques this year, and some of them are the renewing of old plaques that need renewal, and et cetera.
You get a new one because that was lost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, that is the end. There was one written communication from the Board of Supervisors thanking us for our work.
Oh, I have under commissioner presentations. Can we go back?
Yeah.
Informational items. I just wanted to note that, about that little house that was demolished in Aptos on Valencia Street.
Yeah.
It's coming back.
Oh, they're building it?
They're building.
Uh-huh.
So,
Good news.
so anyway, that's in progress. And I don't know any more about that other house that was damaged by fire, but
Okay. Yes.
Becky Steinberg, I have a question. When a plaque is awarded to a structure, historic structure, what protection does that give it, or?
Nothing.
Okay,
Nothing.
because I want to point out that in Santa Cruz City on Silvar Street, I think it is, up by the Mission, it's the wooden house that was the home of the first alcalde of Brent's 40 County, and the first, as I understand, first wooden plank house at the time, and it is being completely remodeled, not to, they're adding a second story, they've dug it up, there are artifacts strewn everywhere. They did a new concrete foundation, and it's like it has been completely gutted and changed. And for a building of such historic importance, it has a blue plaque. You can barely read it, but it just is a travesty to me to see that important places like this that really give a true sense of history to an area can be so modified such that they lose their true historic context.
My understanding is that the blue plaques, the owner of the building requests it. They paid $200.
Yeah, but not always. Sometimes we unearth them before they're discovered.
And so some buildings have blue plaques, but they're not on the inventory. And I would assume a lot of buildings on the inventory do not have blue plaques. And a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, some people are concerned about, I guess, restrictions, attention, and they even, that they don't want to have that recognition.
It's really an architectural and historical award of merit. It doesn't really carry protections. Watsonville doesn't have a historical association, really, that reviews things. And Susie's been working on, for years, working on a new ordinance at city level to have a historic commission, but it's never come through yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
working on it.
Thank you.
And that's why we, what was it, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, was when we initiated to be a part of that ceremony, that day when the city and the Museum of Art and History and some other organization did recognize. So we initiated and asked if we could be a part of that. So this is, I think, our 4th year, 5th year, and they've been doing it for several years.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Museum of Art and History's been doing it for a long, long time.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, then if there's no other comments, then I will move to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I've got a long to-do list.